A dedicated Omega's life is defined by silence and subservience. I lived a simple existence, invisible to the powerful royal packs that dominated the territory. Everything changed the moment I discovered him, a tiny, abandoned heir shivering on my doorstep. I became his shield, his silent protector. He was my forbidden blessing, and I knew the moment his true lineage was discovered, my fragile peace would shatter. I braced myself for the confrontation, but nothing prepared me for him. The Alpha King, a man forged of legend and loss, demanding his rightful son. Now, I am trapped in a glittering world of shadows and political fire, bound to a formidable ruler by a single, precious child, a bond that threatens to destroy the rigid boundaries of our world entirely. The silence of the Blackwood borderlands, usually a comfort, had become heavy, stretched thin by the anxiety that had been my constant companion for weeks. Every breath I took was scented with the faint, sweet milk of the small life I harbored. I, Willow Hayes, 25, a quiet and dedicated Omega, had found my purpose in this tiny, fragile human I called Finn. He was my world, an anchor in the secluded haven of my Whispering Creek cottage. I knew the danger of keeping him, especially after noticing the faint, intricate embroidery on the edge of the cold wool blanket he was wrapped in, a pattern too refined for any common pack. Yet, every time Finn Thorne, 6 months, smiled up at me, my resolve hardened. I would face the devil himself before I let this innocent child feel the cold of the world again. The devil arrived not with fire and brimstone, but with the scent of raw, ancient power and sorrow. It happened past midnight. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment he crossed the perimeter of the territory. I heard the deep crunch of military boots on the frozen earth before I saw the imposing figure fill my doorway, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. Caelan Thorne, 38, the Alpha King of the Thorn territory, was a legend made flesh. He was staggeringly tall, powerfully built, his silver eyes molten with a grief so profound it seemed to pull the light from the room. A jagged scar ran along his jawline, a testament to battles won, and perhaps losses endured. He moved with a commanding grace that made my Omega instincts scream in terrified submission, even as my protective instincts for Finn warred against it. Finn was stirring in my arms, his fair hair catching the candlelight. Caelan's gaze locked onto the baby. It was an instant connection, a visceral jolt that resonated through the room. Caelan didn't move for what felt like an eternity, his breathing shallow. "My son," he finally rasped, the sound tearing from his throat. I clutched Finn tighter. "He's mine. You can't." Caelan didn't need to snarl or shout to silence me. His sheer presence was enough. He took one step forward, and I felt the weight of the crown he wore, the burden of his royal status, the agonizing desire of a father finding the heir he had mourned as dead for months. "Don't insult my intelligence, Omega," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Look at his eyes. They are Clara's." Clara Thorne, his deceased Luna, was a name whispered in sorrow throughout the kingdom, her elegance and gentle demeanor a painful memory for the Alpha King. Her death, 6 months prior to this moment, had shattered Caelan and plunged the kingdom into instability. Caelan advanced, stopping only when he could reach out and gently touch Finn's rosy cheek. He noticed the simple chain had strung around Finn's neck, dangling the tiny engraved Finn's nursery locket that had been found inside the blanket. It was unmistakable, a royal artifact. "He was taken," Caelan muttered, pulling the blanket away from Finn to examine the crest. His rage, previously channeled into grief, twisted into something colder, targeted. "They told me he didn't survive the chaos of the night Clara passed. They told me he was lost to the snow." I stood frozen, the truth dawning on me. This wasn't a baby lost to accident. This was the result of a deliberate, vicious plot. "Who?" I whispered, unable to comprehend the cruelty. Caelan turned, his silver eyes flashing with deadly clarity. "Sloane Asher, 35, a powerful female alpha who has been circling the widowed throne since Clara was laid to rest. She engineered this. She needed me broken, without an heir, vulnerable to her political maneuvering." The exposure of Sloane's conspiracy was sudden, brutal, and chilling. Sloane, known for her sharp features and imposing stature, had aspired to be queen. By removing the heir, she planned to force Caelan into a politically expedient marriage, securing her own assent. The audacity of the betrayal, carried out by someone Caelan had trusted, shook the foundation of his immense power. "You didn't hand him over. You protected him," Caelan observed, his scrutiny intense, piercing through my subservient Omega status to see the fierce, maternal beta-level protector beneath. "Why?" "He needed me," I stated simply, "and I needed him." The confrontation at the cottage ended not with a fight, but with a declaration. The Alpha King did not take Finn from me. He took us, within hours, I was thrust into the glittering, labyrinthine center of power, the Ethelgard citadel. The sheer opulence of the royal palace was overwhelming, a dizzying maze of polished marble and cold, ancient wealth. I, an Omega who lived by foraging and mending, was now residing in a guest wing adjacent to the king's chambers, deemed Finn's indispensable guardian. My integration into the citadel was fraught with tension. The other members of the royal court, especially the higher-ranking alphas and betas, looked down upon me. Their contempt was a tangible weight, an unspoken question. Why is an Omega here, serving the king's heir? Kaelin, burdened by responsibility, conflicted by the deep betrayal he had suffered, and struggling to relearn how to be a father to a baby he thought was gone, relied on me entirely. Finn was still adjusting to the new environment, but whenever he was placed in Kaelin's powerful arms, the baby would immediately reach back for me, for the familiar scent of my care. This undeniable, unbreakable bond over Finn forced Kaelin and me into constant proximity. We were opposites defined by the rigid boundaries of our society, the dominant Alpha King and the traditionally subservient Omega. Yet, as we navigated the royal nursery late at night, whispering strategies about Finn's feeding schedule or his teething discomfort, the boundaries began to blur. One evening, I was soothing Finn back to sleep, humming a tune my own deceased mother used to sing. Kaelin entered the room, shedding the heavy mantle of royalty for a moment, looking simply like a tired, grieving father. He watched me, his silver eyes intense. "You are the only person he trusts, Willow." "He is my life now, Kaelin," I replied, using his given name, a sign of the intimacy that had grown from shared desperation. He approached, the air thick with his rich alpha scent, cedar, rain, and raw power. The proximity was intoxicating, dangerous. He reached out, intending perhaps to touch Finn, but his scarred hand brushed my soft brown hair instead. It was the moment of the elemental mate pull. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was a devastating, elemental recognition that hit me like a physical blow, stripping away every societal expectation, every rank, every restriction. My body responded immediately, a deep, resonant ache that signaled acceptance. Kaelin froze, his dominance battling the raw, unexpected pull. His expression shifted from commanding alpha to profoundly conflicted male. Omegas were submissive, meant to serve, not to stand as equal mates to kings. "This cannot be," he whispered, his voice shaking with denial. "But it is," I confessed, the truth burning between us. I was no beta, no alpha, just an Omega who had given his son life when he had none. The next day, the political tension reached its inevitable peak. Sloane Asher, determined to discredit me and reclaim the power she believed was her due, requested a formal audience in the grand throne room of the Ethelgard citadel. The climax unfolded under the gaze of the entire royal council. Sloane, sleek and menacing in black, addressed Kaelin directly, her voice dripping with venom. "Your Majesty, the continued presence of this Omega, a low-ranking member of an obscure pack, is an insult to the royal line and a security risk. She is an aberration. She has no place here, certainly not so close to the heir." The council murmured their agreement. It was the moment Kaelin had to choose, adhere to the societal laws that protected his rule, or follow the bond he felt for his son and the Omega who saved him. Kaelin, wearing the Thorn family crest ring, stood from the throne, his stature overwhelming. He looked at me, then at Sloane, and finally across the room at his court. "Sloane Asher," Kaelin's voice thundered, absolute and commanding, "you speak of insult and risk, yet it was you who risked my line. You who insulted the memory of my Luna by stealing my heir. Your sentence is exile. You will leave these lands tonight." Sloane turned white, her ambition crashing around her. He then looked at me, Willow Hayes, standing small and resolute, Finn safely nestled against my hip. "As for Willow," Kaelin continued, his silver eyes blazing with fierce possession that encompassed both me and Finn, "she is not an aberration. She is the protector of the Thorn heir, and the only light that has pierced the darkness of this citadel in 6 months. She defies your expectations of rank and servitude because her love for Finn transcends all of your petty societal rules." He descended the steps of the dais, stopping before me. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, a public, tender gesture that shocked the entire court into silence. "The kingdom needs stability, and Finn needs his mother," Kaelin declared, his voice firm, resolute, sealing our fate. "You were intended to be my mate, Omega. The elemental pull is undeniable, a truth sent to me by the moon itself, defying the rules your rank dictated." He lifted the hand, wearing the Thorn family crest ring, reaching for my hand. "I name Willow Hayes my Luna. She has proven her heart, her loyalty, and her resilience. She has already earned the right to stand beside me. From this day forward, she is queen, and together we will redefine what power and love mean in this kingdom." The declaration was a revolutionary act, tearing down centuries of tradition, an omega, Luna, to the Alpha King. My quiet life was irrevocably gone, replaced by a tumultuous, dazzling future fought amidst political reconstruction and the desperate, profound hope that I could truly be the foundation Kaelin and Finn needed. I looked up at Kaelin, the grief in his eyes finally softened by a fierce, newly ignited protective instinct, and knew that standing here, an omega beside her king, was exactly where I was meant to be. The quiet, dedicated woman I was had been shed, replaced by a Luna who understood that sometimes the greatest strength lies in the softest heart. The sheer force of Kaelin's decree reverberated through the vast throne room, leaving a silence colder and heavier than the marble underfoot. The air, thick moments ago with contempt and political maneuvering, now crackled with fear and astonished obedience. I stood there, rooted to the spot, Finn stirring softly against my shoulder, the faint scent of his milk contrasting sharply with the overwhelming alpha musk and polished metal of the Ethelgard citadel. I felt the burning stares of the assembled court, alphas, betas, and high-ranking omegas alike. They didn't see their queen. They saw an anomaly, a low-ranking omega who had somehow usurped a position meant for the highest noble blood. Kaelin's declaration that the elemental pull defied rank was nothing short of heresy in their ancient, structured society. Kaelin's silver eyes never left mine. The intense protective light in them had chased away the profound grief that had haunted him for months. He had just torn down the most sacred wall of his kingdom for me. When he took my hand, the heat of the Thorn family crest ring transferred to my skin, searing me with the reality of my new status. I was not being led to imprisonment or servitude. I was being elevated. "We retire," Kaelin commanded, his voice deep and final, cutting short any possibility of protest from the stunned council. He didn't wait for me to follow. He kept my hand secure in his, leading me away from the dais, through hushed halls and past bowing guards. The walk felt unreal, a dizzying spiral away from the life I knew, and toward a future I couldn't yet grasp. Finn, recognizing the tension, began to fuss, and Kaelin immediately slowed his powerful stride. We reached the private, opulent wing adjacent to his own. It was not the simple guest suite I had been occupying, but the royal Luna's private solar, furnished in rich, deep fabrics, and smelling faintly of cedar and forgotten lilac, the lingering ghost of Clara. As the heavy oak door closed behind us, sealing us away from the scrutiny of the court, the protective shield Kaelin wore seemed to fall. He released my hand, turning to face me, and the conflict I had sensed earlier flared violently in his eyes. "Willow," he began, running a hand over the short silver strands of his hair, looking every bit the burdened king. "Do you understand what I have just done?" I shifted Finn, settling him more securely against my chest. "You saved me. You chose Finn. I chose us," Kaelin corrected, stepping closer. "I chose the truth the moon offered, even if it threatens to unravel centuries of tradition. The council will not accept this easily. They look at you, and they see weakness." I didn't flinch. I was an omega, yes, but my life in the Blackwood borderlands had taught me a resilience that surpassed mere rank. They look at me and see an omega. They don't see the woman who kept your son alive and well for 6 months when their king believed him dead. Their prejudice is their weakness, not mine. A faint smile touched Kaelin's scarred jawline, an expression of admiration that took my breath away. "Exactly, and that strength, Willow, is why I know this is right. But the scrutiny will be immense. Every move you make, every order you give, every time you breathe, it will be judged against the impossible standard Clara set." The mention of his deceased Luna, though gentle, brought a sharp pang of reality. Clara was elegance and tradition. I was dirt and practicality. "I am not Clara," I stated, my voice quiet but firm. "I can only be Willow. I can only love Finn and stand by you." Kaelin closed the distance between us completely, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders, his powerful alpha scent enveloping me in a cocoon of safety and overwhelming desire. The elemental pull was a living thing between us, humming beneath the surface of the conversation. "The bond is too strong to ignore, Omega," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. "It's a cruel irony. The moon paired me with a gentle Luna who stabilized my kingdom, and when she was lost, I was paired with a fiercely protective Omega who threatens to dismantle it, yet saves its future." He didn't kiss me then, but the air was charged with the implicit promise. We were linked by destiny, by shared parenthood, and by the sheer magnitude of the political earthquake we had just triggered. The next few days were a blur of intense meetings, strategy sessions, and the dizzying effort of learning the protocols of the Ethelgard citadel, my quiet life was definitively gone. I was fitted for gowns and introduced to staff, all while juggling Finn's strict feeding schedule. The political unrest was immediate. While no one dared defy the Alpha King publicly, the resistance was subtle, manipulative, and deeply rooted. Reports came in that high-ranking Beta families who had ties to Sloane were openly questioning the legitimacy of the mate poll, claiming it was merely Kaelin's desperation masking political folly. One afternoon, Kaelin called me into the war room, a heavily guarded chamber where maps and strategic documents covered every surface. He was speaking to his most trusted advisors, two grim-faced alphas who clearly found my presence inappropriate. "The Northern Territories are restive," Kaelin announced, tapping a map marked near the Blackwood borderlands. "Sloane's influence there ran deep. We need a clear show of unity and strength, something they cannot argue against." One of the advisors, a stern alpha named Damon, cleared his throat, directing his comments pointedly at Kaelin, ignoring me completely. "With respect, Your Majesty, the introduction of a new Luna, especially one who defies established rank, will be seen as weakness. It feeds the narrative that you are acting impulsively due to your loss." Kaelin's silver eyes hardened, the first sign of his royal temper since the confrontation. "My decisions are sound, Damon. I lost Finn once because I trusted too deeply. I will not make that mistake again. Willow's loyalty is absolute, proven by her actions, not by her bloodline." He turned to me, the gesture pulling my rank from Omega to equal. "Willow, the council will convene tomorrow morning. We will formally present Finn and outline the succession. I need you there, standing beside me, not just as my intended mate, but as the undeniable protector of the heir." It was the ultimate challenge, the moment Kaelin would force the entire kingdom to bow to the new reality. This was the climax of our political journey. The following morning, I dressed not in a regal gown, but in a simple, deep navy dress, chosen deliberately to reflect my inherent simplicity, yet tailored with the quiet dignity Kaelin insisted upon. Finn, 6 months, looked like a tiny prince in his royal finery, his bright blue eyes wide with curiosity. I carried him, the Thorne family crest ring feeling heavy and important on my finger. The High Council chamber was even more imposing than the throne room. It was a space designed for measured debate and ruthless power. Every member of the kingdom's leadership was present: politicians, military leaders, and heads of the most ancient pacts. Kaelin stood at the head of the immense, polished table, radiating dominance. He let the tension build for several agonizing minutes before he spoke. "Members of the High Council," Kaelin began, his voice ringing with authority. "6 months ago, tragedy struck our kingdom. We lost Luna Clara, and shortly thereafter, we believed we lost our heir, Finn. This loss was not due to accident, but due to calculated betrayal orchestrated by Sloane, who now faces exile." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces, some defiant, others wary. "I stand here today with my son, safe and healthy, because of the fierce loyalty and protective heart of the woman beside me, Willow." He placed his hand on my lower back, a steady, intimate pressure that grounded me. My Omega instincts, usually prone to submission, were now infused with a nascent alpha strength drawn from Kaelin's proximity and my bond to Finn. Willow Hayes did not know who Finn was. She did not seek reward or status. She acted purely out of compassion and an overwhelming instinct to protect the innocent. She sheltered him, fed him, and risked her own safety for him when the kingdom was misled into believing he was gone. Kaelin lifted Finn slightly, presenting him to the council. Finn, trusting and innocent, reached out one small hand, grasping the silver chain of the Finn's nursery locket hanging from my neck. "There are some among you who question the legitimacy of this new union," Kaelin stated, his eyes narrowing slightly toward Damon and his allies. "You whisper that an Omega cannot stand beside a king. You adhere to antiquated rules over elemental truth." He looked down at me, and his silver eyes softened, reflecting the depth of his devotion. "Willow is my mate. The moon has decreed it. But more than that, she is the only person Finn recognizes as his mother. She is the living proof of the resilience of the Thorne line, and the only person capable of ensuring the heir's emotional well-being and security. The laws of this kingdom are designed to protect its future, and Willow is the future." Kaelin then did something truly revolutionary. He stepped back, allowing me to speak. The hall held its breath. They expected a nervous whisper, a subservient nod. I didn't look at Kaelin for approval. I looked at the council, meeting their challenging stares head-on. My life was quiet, secluded, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the silent power Kaelin gifted me. I had no desire for this citadel, or for a crown, but when I held Finn, everything changed. I am an Omega. We are nurturers, yes, but we are also the foundation. I learned in the Borderlands that survival is not about dominance, but about tenacity. I smoothed Finn's fair hair, I will not be the Luna who campaigns for power, but the Luna who protects the heart of this family and the future of this kingdom. I defied tradition not by choice, but by necessity. Now, I stand beside Kaelin, not just as his mate, but as a guardian. If you question my resolve, you question the security of your king and your heir. The finality of my words, coupled with the sight of the king's heir sleeping peacefully in the arms of his Omega guardian, struck a chord deeper than political maneuvering. It was raw, emotional truth, something the cynical council hadn't expected. Kaelin smiled then, a genuine relieved expression that wiped years of sorrow from his face. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, drawing me close, solidifying our new unit for all to see. The succession is clear. Finn will inherit, protected by his Luna, Kaelin concluded. Our kingdom will redefine power. It is not always dominant. Sometimes it is fiercely gentle. The council, defeated by the combined force of the Alpha King's conviction and the undeniable sight of the heir safe in my arms, began to offer reluctant, ritualistic bows of acceptance. The seeds of revolution had been sown, wrapped in the protective love of an Omega. Later that evening, in the quiet sanctuary of the Lunas Solar, Kaelin finally held me, the exhaustion of the day etched on his strong features. Finn was asleep in the adjacent nursery. You stood against them, Willow, Kaelin whispered into my soft brown hair, his scent washing over me, calming the residual adrenaline. You were magnificent. I was only protecting what is ours, I replied, looking up at his silver eyes, now full not of conflict, but of deep belonging. The rigid boundaries of our society had been destroyed, replaced by the elemental pull and the unbreakable bond forged over a tiny abandoned baby. Kaelin and I were opposites, but we were an undeniable whole. I was the quiet Omega, now the foundation of a royal line, ready to face the turbulent future not as a subservient, but as a fierce, resolute queen, proving that the greatest power often resides in the deepest, most resilient love. The lingering scent of cedar and faint ghostly lilac in the Lunas Solar became my constant companion. It was beautiful, undeniably, yet every intricate silk drape and gold thread seemed to remind me that this space had belonged to another, a Luna defined by grace and societal perfection. I moved through the opulence like a trespasser, my practical cotton clothing feeling alien against the sheer weight of the wealth. Kaelin, however, didn't notice the ghosts. When he was here, he only saw me and Finn. He arrived late every night, shedding the burden of the crown the moment the heavy door clicked shut. One evening I found him leaning over Finn's intricately carved crib, his broad shoulders slumped, the weight of the kingdom temporarily lifted. They are terrified, Kaelin murmured, without turning, the sound deep and worn, not of my power, but of what you represent. They prefer the comfortable, predictable lie to the frightening, undeniable truth. I approached him silently, placing a hand on his back. Even through the thick fabric of his tunic, the heat and coiled power of his alpha core were palpable. I am not trying to frighten them, Kaelin. I just want to protect Finn. He turned, his silver eyes catching the low light of the room. You are doing more than protecting him, Willow. You are protecting me. I had become hollow. Sloane's betrayal. It broke my trust in everything established. But you, an anomaly, proved that loyalty and truth exist outside the parameters of rank. His gaze dropped to my lips, and the humming charge between us, the elemental pull, intensified. Tonight, there was no political discussion, no mention of the restless northern territories. There was only raw, necessary connection. I am afraid of failing you, I confessed, the words quiet, pulled from the deepest part of my Omega reserve. I am not trained for this. I can hold a sick baby and clean a wound, but ruling, Kaelin placed his powerful hands on either side of my face, his thumb grazing my scarred jawline. You rule my heart, Willow, and you govern the safety of my heir. That is the only training that matters. Elegance is fleeting. Tenacity is forever. He finally closed the distance, the kiss immediate and possessive, not a gentle courtship, but a claiming. It was the fusion of Alpha and Omega, the dominant force meeting the resilient foundation, proving that the societal hierarchy was nothing compared to the demands of the moon. When he pulled back, my head was spinning, my quiet Borderlands life officially obliterated by the force of his desire. The next phase of the political battle was unavoidable, the formal presentation of the heir to the wider populace and the heads of the peripheral packs. It was a required show of strength and continuity. Kaelin insisted on holding the event in the vast, open grounds of the Citadel's outer courtyard, where thousands could witness the unity of the new royal family. Fear tightened my chest the moment we stepped onto the elaborate stone balcony overlooking the throng of people. The air was electric, thick with thousands of scents: curiosity, resentment, loyalty, and sheer confusion. Kaelin stood like a bronze statue beside me, radiating unshakable dominance. Finn, dressed in white velvet, slept peacefully against my shoulder, oblivious to the seismic shift his existence had caused. Kalen spoke first, his voice booming over the courtyard, reciting the tragedy of Clara's death and the cruelty of Sloane's conspiracy. Sloane sought to destabilize the throne through deceit. She stole my son, believing that grief would render me malleable, or that I would choose a politically expedient, albeit unbonded, alliance, Kalen announced, his eyes sweeping across the crowd, challenging every whisper of dissent. But the moon saw fit to guide the heir to the most loyal, most resilient heart in our kingdom, he continued, turning to me. Willow Hayes sheltered him, protected him, and brought him back. She is not merely my mate by decree, but by destiny and deed. The crowd offered a mixed chorus of roars and confused murmurs. The sight of an Omega standing shoulder to shoulder with the Alpha King, holding the heir, was truly revolutionary. Then, the murmurs turned into shouting. From the section reserved for the outlying pack leaders, many known to have ties to Sloane's mercantile interests, a surge erupted. It wasn't a riot, but a highly coordinated distraction. A sharp, loud noise, a metal banner collapsing with a deliberate crash, drew Kalen's attention, and the focus of the guards momentarily toward the far flank of the courtyard. It was a perfect, calculated move designed to expose the king and the heir. I watched Kalen's jaw tighten, his focus instantly shifting toward the disturbance, his Alpha Guard instinct taking over. This is it, I realized with chilling clarity. Sloane's final, desperate attempt. In the brief chaos, one figure, a massive, heavily built beta known for his allegiance to Sloane, broke rank from the pack leaders section. He moved with alarming speed, not toward Kalen, but toward the balcony itself, scaling the low wall with terrifying agility. His eyes were locked on Finn. Kalen saw him instantly, his protective snarl a guttural sound that shook the stone beneath our feet. He started forward, but the beta was already too close. The guards assigned to the balcony were just reacting, their movement slowed by the initial diversion. My body moved before my mind registered the thought. My training from the borderlands, survival, defense, protection above all else, kicked in, overriding the ingrained Omega submission. I couldn't fight the beta, but I could protect Finn. I spun around, using the height of the balcony railing, shielding Finn's small body completely with my own. Instead of drawing a weapon, I grabbed the heavy, decorative bronze torch stand situated nearby, meant for ceremonial lighting, and swung it with all my strength. It was not a clean hit, but the heavy base connected with the beta's shoulder just as he lunged, throwing him off balance. He roared in surprise and pain, stumbling back, momentarily breaking his focus on Finn. That second was all Kalen needed. The king's transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The political leader vanished, replaced by the primal Alpha King protecting his bloodline. He didn't use a sword, he used pure force. With a leap that defied human ability, Kalen was over the railing, slamming into the beta midair. The fight was brutal and swift, ending with a sickening crack as Kalen ensured the beta would never threaten his family again. The silence that followed was profound, deeper than any political deference. I stood there, trembling, still holding the torch stand, Finn now awake and beginning to cry in my arms. The courtyard was utterly stunned. They hadn't witnessed an Alpha King fighting. They had witnessed a king defending his mate and heir, aided by that very mate. Kalen returned to the balcony, not looking at the downed enemy, but rushing straight to me. He took the heavy torch from my numb fingers and gently cupped my face. "You defended him?" Kalen whispered, his voice hoarse, thick with adrenaline and overwhelming pride. "You stood against the threat." My own breath hitched as I tried to calm Finn, rocking him gently. He wanted Finn. I couldn't let him take him again. Kalen pulled me and Finn tightly against his chest, creating an impenetrable circle. His scent, usually commanding, was now intensely soothing. He faced the courtyard again, his voice now lower, carrying a new, terrifying weight of finality. "Let this be a lesson to all who believe the throne is vulnerable. My Luna is not a decorative figurehead. She is the shield. The heir is protected, and those who attempt betrayal will face the king's wrath." The resulting roar from the courtyard was unified, this time not confused but fiercely supportive. They had seen the truth. The Omega was the king's strength, not his weakness. The ancient rules of rank had dissolved completely in that moment of crisis. Later, back in the quiet safety of the Citadel, after the guards had been reorganized and the remaining network of Sloane's influence was being rooted out, Kalen and I finally found a moment alone. I was sitting in front of the ornate vanity, running a brush through my soft brown hair, still feeling the tremor in my hands. Kalen stood behind me, his hands resting heavily on my shoulders, grounding me. "The council will not whisper now, Willow," he said, looking at our reflection. The massive, scarred Alpha King and the petite Omega, side by side. They saw your strength. They saw the instinct that kept my son alive for 6 months, and the bravery that protected him today. I just reacted. I insisted, leaning back into his solid embrace. "That is the difference between you and the other women they expected me to choose. They would have frozen. You fought. You redefine the role of Luna in a single terrifying instant. He kissed the top of my head, a deep, reverent gesture. The Thorn family crest ring gleamed on my finger, no longer feeling like a heavy symbol of borrowed status, but a natural extension of my own self. The boundaries are gone. My Omega, Kalen murmured, his breath warm against my ear. There is no king and subservient rank here. There is just Kalen, Willow, and Finn. We are one pack. You are my queen, and the only rule you must ever follow is to keep that fiercely gentle heart beating within my kingdom. I closed my eyes, letting the protective weight of his presence wash over me. The turmoil of the past few weeks, the fear, the political upheaval, the overwhelming transformation had finally settled into a profound, undeniable peace. My quiet life was definitively traded for one of immense power and constant vigilance, but I stood beside the king, not in his shadow. The greatest power was not dominance, but the elemental, resilient love I had found protecting an abandoned baby, a love that had now crowned an Omega Luna. Our kingdom would be redefined, built upon the foundation of tenacity, and the truth revealed by the moon. Join the squad, subscribe, and smash that like button.